we're going to look at is we're going to talk about AI search, generative engine optimization, and how this is changing consumer behavior. Then we're going to, once we kind of better define the problem, then we can more define the solution. We're going to look at a good prompt library, which is really foundational to measurement. And then from there, like what everyone just wants to know is the so what can we do? The technical solutions, the content solutions, and the kind of the offsite solutions are sort of the three buckets of things we can actually do. We've got actual kind of Q&A time at the end. Last webinar, I did a webinar on this kind of subject on Monday, more specific to tourism, and we just did questions throughout, which worked really well. So please do just ask your questions as we go. This space here, let me frame. I've got a few slides here: the search problem, the AI search kind of problem, and then the kind of the strategy problem, and then the measurement problem, the diagnosis problem, the implementation problem. I want to just start by really framing like I said, if we can clearly define the problem and actually think really critically about the subject, I think that's probably the most valuable thing we can do in this session. So let me just give you some of the top line kind of stats to get you thinking about this. ChatGPT has 900 million weekly active users. Now, that's a real big number, and you kind of hear, oh, that's cool. But I want you to just picture this right now. Like, use your imaginations. I want you to imagine every single person in America going to ChatGPT. And then I want to picture every single person in the European Union going to ChatGPT. And then I want you to picture every single person in Australia. And then every single person in New Zealand. More than that, that number doesn't even equate to 900 million people going to ChatGPT. This is a huge volume. ChatGPT hit basically 100 million users in, what was the stat? It's basically like what Instagram did in 2.5 years, ChatGPT did in a quarter, basically. It's just wild, the growth and the uptake of these platforms. The new kid on the block, as of like May 2026, is Gemini. Is actually definitely like closing the arms race. This is a different stat. This is monthly users. This isn't weekly active users. But Google's AI mode, on the other hand, has just reached 1 billion monthly users, and kind of the AI overviews is now hitting 2.5 users monthly. This is a really big shift in behavior. And then also there's kind of these big sort of updates around what Google's doing in this space. And so where I think this is most hit home for a lot of people is that we've started personally using it ourselves. And so the more conversations we're having with clients about AI search and generative engine optimization is they're going, I'm now using these tools. So how many of my customers are? Versus before, when we were talking about this kind of a year ago, 2 years ago, not necessarily everyone had adopted it. But what I feel like people are actually kind of here now going, holy, the way we interact, the way we get information is actually changed. I do want to, this isn't in my like notes, but I was just kind of like, I'd love to think about this stuff. And I was thinking about this idea of, actually, no, I'm not going to say that. Ha! This is good. All right. No questions yet? No, just can. Thank you. All right. Let's keep on keeping on. The AI search problem. For the first time as of, I think it was May again this year, early June, sorry, machines generated more web traffic than people for the first time in internet history. This is a really interesting space. If you've been doing content strategy for a long time, your website's most important visitors might not be humans anymore. And this is a big part of this is measurement. And hopefully some of you in this or watching this thing have actually started to think about tracking bot traffic. There is through Cloudflare basically is where it gets easiest, but actually tracking bots of log traffic of actual GPT bot, Amazon bot, Apple bot, whatever. There's actually all these kind of models out there, Claude bot, that are actually sent out. There's obviously the bots are kind of generating their own index, but also there's kind of people triggering a search and off their bot goes. And that bot is being pinged in a server that is retrieving that information. And so it's an interesting space as you think about this measurement space, where is someone's bot, someone's agentically pushed bot, actually kind of the equivalent of a person looking at it? Maybe not. We'll look at that in a bit bit more detailed. There's nothing official yet, but Google has started testing AI overviews kind of in ads. So in this little screenshot here, you can see it's kind of like going, here's the typical search ad, and then it's giving us this AI overview in the sponsored result. And that's just pointing that space of how AI is just kind of getting into all these little moments. It's not as linear as I'm in ChatGPT, I'm not. It's actually just AI is changing the nature of the way that we consume and retrieve information. The other big space is GEO's like not new now. This has been around for kind of a couple of years, and that will maybe longer, arguably. But the idea of that what we're seeing is a lot of these hacks are being blocked. So obviously, I'm just like nerding out off the space, just loving it. But we're seeing a lot of the things that people were kind of saying, hey, this is working. We're getting heaps of wins in this space. Say, for example, the most common one was people basically writing listicles. So someone searches for like best da 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 in my category, best geo agency in New Zealand, in my market, whatever it is, type of thing. And so in the SaaS tech world, a lot of people are just going out and creating these articles, going, okay, well, I'll just write the top 10 best GEO agencies in New Zealand, and we'll have kind of subcategories. We'll do a kind of a long form. We'll do a pretty good job of the resource. But what we're seeing now is the way that as a GPT 5.5 started to change the way it was fanning out queries to avoid this kind of hack working. And so these types of spaces are already starting to kind of like no longer work. And this is kind of funny because if you've been in SEO for a long time, this is just like history repeating itself. Literally, people have been like, wow, we can really hack this. We can just cram all this stuff in. And then realizing Google, like if I was to summarize like doing SEO for 15 years in a summary, you go, why do you use Google? Have you thought about it? Why do you use like Google, or why do you use ChatGPT? Because it gives you the best answer to the question. So if you try to hack the system, but you're not actually the best answer for the question, the model, the algorithm, whatever it is going to get better because it's rewarded for serving the best answer, and it's ultimately a human at the end of the screen. It's ultimately a human that's actually going to spend money. It's not a metric. It's not a vanity thing. It's ultimately, this whole space is about attracting like and helping people, generating trust, being reliable, being helpful, typically for commercial outcomes. And so this space is so it's just worth thinking about. And so we're seeing people kind of try to hack this GEO space, but just like SEO, right as rain, we're already starting to see it, everything that where people are hacking and it's not genuinely being the most helpful answer to the prompt, to the query. We're seeing the machines evolve. There's also some really cool space, which is Google has officially published its AI optimization guide. I see this as like, it's kind of cool. It's like affirming it as like legit in the industry, but we might even pop open the guide to have a look at it in detail, because I think there's a lot of wealth of information there as you think about GEO strategy and what you should be measuring. And also just the old adage, if you measure it, you can manage it. If you measure it, you can improve it. And so that's why that's why the focus of this is around improving your measurement. And so, but yeah, just affirming that this GEO space is a legitimate kind of space. Like I said, the volume is there. It's no longer this kind of nice to have or should we do it. It's going, this is just like a shift in consumer behavior. There's this other space as well, like models are getting better. And sorry, it's a bit hard to see in this screenshot. But effectively, the closer the models are getting together, the faster they're being released. But ironically, this green line down the bottom, Sophie, can you see my mouse? Oh, you can't. You can only see the slides. All right. So the green line down the bottom is Google's kind of release, but I think quietly behind the scenes, Google is the best at organizing the world's information. And what they're doing in that Gemini space as far as like commercial outcomes is going to be really interesting. Google's also kind of released this kind of agentic, what do you call it, universal commerce protocol. But the idea of like these machines being able to book and use an API type space to retrieve more accurate information around for product information, for purchasing information, and then eventually agents booking this space. And so, but this is one of those things I've not gone into like AI for commerce. But if you want to know more about that, definitely just pop that in the question. Um, but the reason I bring up the slide is because as we think about AI search and strategically how you're prioritizing this in your organization, is just noting that the models are getting better. Like, yeah, there's so much slop. Yeah, I'm so fatigued. I'm so over crappy AI content and crappy AI inauthentic stuff. However, things are getting better. It's an interesting time to space. So I literally wrote these questions out in strategy. Strategy, if I was to summarize it really simply, is you kind of go, okay, where do we want to be? What's our dream state? And then you kind of go, okay, well, where are we now? So this is where we want to be. Where are we actually at now? And then you kind of go, what's the gap and what's the plan to go from where we are to where we want to be? That is literally the framework of strategy. And so to then narrow that down as you think about GEO and AI search, and just how customers and the change in consumer behavior, there's some strategic questions that I want you to be thinking about as you enter this space. And this first one here is, to what degree can we even influence AI, what AI is saying? Because we can measure this space, but if we can't do anything to change it, so what? So the question is to what degree can we influence AI, and what impact will it have on our business? The second question I've got here is how. So that following on from that is that I hope that you're thinking about, and the reason you're on this call is because you're thinking, how much should we prioritize this? How important is this for our business? Like, how much are we losing out to competitors, to alternative solutions, because we're not accurately represented. We're not well represented for this new way that people are gaining and retrieving and interacting with information. And so the question, great strategy questions. If we say yes to this, what are we saying no to? If you move more of your budget to, or more of your resource, or you carve out, I guess as a leadership team, more of your marketing budget towards this, what are you saying no to? Is that coming out of your profit margin? Is that coming from another channel? Classic kind of budget management questions. If we improve performance in AI, what else benefits? This is helping you think a bit more strategically. Can you do things? Can you hedge your bet? Can you go, well, let's make changes that will not just improve AI, but we know will actually improve SEO, and we know will actually help our customers? Because then you're hedging your bet by not just going, what can we hack, but actually what can we invest in that's going to really help our performance as a business. And I guess, again, how many of our customers and potential customers use AI and in what way? Because this is very different. Depending on the nature of the industry, depends on the path to purchase. And understanding your unique path to purchase and what's unique about your customer journey is really critical, because for some of your businesses, this is absolutely you could basically calculate or figure out a way to find out. And for some industries, it's just absolutely huge. It's just completely changed the game. And there's elements, we do a lot of work in travel and tourism, like long buying journeys. And we just know that a huge amount of travel, this AI kind of itinerary planning logistics space, the uptake is huge. The research, the numbers that are coming out of the qual kind of research, both from platform usage, but also from surveying people, is just huge. It's just massively dominated the industry. And so you've got to really think, if we play in that space, how much are we really prioritizing this work? No questions yet. Please do ask your questions. This is big stuff. And like I said, we don't actually have time to go into half of this, but if you want to know, drop your questions in the chat, please. Measurement questions. So the strategy questions, for me, when I look at a strategy question, how much should we prioritize AI? It becomes a measurement question. So the question becomes, how do you measure your brand in AI if the responses are always changing? It's kind of more of a critique. If responses, like AI's heavily varies responses based on personalization, based on context. So how do you even measure your brand in AI? If that's the case, how do we make sure we've got a reliable model? What metrics do we track, and what do they even mean? What should show? What would actually show if we're losing out? What would show if we're winning? There's a metric, but so what? How do we know? Is it good? Is it bad? What's the context of that space? What's the kind of the benchmark? And then where in the customer buying journey are we optimizing? This to me is the ultimate space of clarity, and we'll talk more about that. Where are we performing currently? What are the opportunities? How hard or time consuming or expensive is it to implement the changes that would actually improve this? Kind of back to that strategy question. What can we do short term? What can we do long term? And then from measurement questions, we go into what I'd call diagnosis, um, because you're kind of going to have your benchmark type metrics, but then there's this like diagnosis. Why are we strong? And this is, yeah, the why. Why are we strong in some areas and not others? How does AI even position our brand? Who does AI recommend us for and why? What would shaping decisions, how would shaping decision making content in our favor make AI more accurate? How accurate is the information being portrayed and why? What brands are doing better than us and why are they doing better than us? Where are we being cited? Where are we being mentioned? Where are we ranked when listed in numbers or bullet points? What share of the conversation is about us? There's some more like actual nuances when you get into the nitty gritty of geo, which is like we've been cited, but we've not influenced much of the conversation, or we've really heavily influenced the conversation, but we have not really cited much. Which it's a really interesting space as you actually push into this at depth. And then we move into execution. Okay, what will we do? What gets priority? How confident are we that these will work? How do we create a consistent narrative about our brand? That's actually really that's easier said than done. How do we have a presence on all these platforms that are influencing our responses? Do you even have access to your Wikipedia page? Do you have a Reddit account and a Reddit strategy? Do you want to? What's the investment? How will we maintain and manage these platforms? How do we do it authentically? How do we turn up as our brand in that moment? What skills do we have in-house? What skills don't we have? What don't we know? What are our biases? What are our blind spots? What resources do we need to outsource? And then this question, who else needs to understand and influence this work? As you move into like a real serious like SEO, GEO strategy, this touches multiple parts of the business. It's the biggest flaw of like SEO and GEO is that it's a silo with a bunch of nerds. When really it's becoming a brand, the biggest like brand space. How your brand turns up in this space is arguably the future, as we'll look at in a moment. And then what's the cost of inaction? This is, again, these are probably more strategy questions, but this is the stuff that I hope you're thinking about as a marketing leader when it comes to the space, because I just listed out some pretty big punchy stats. Like I said, this is the biggest shift in probably like consumer buying behavior we've seen in the last very long time. And yeah, things are changing. And so the question is like, are you leaning into this? Are you sitting up and are you being strategic, or are you just kind of reading articles or buying into the hype? Like, are you actually critically thinking about this for your business? Okay, I've kind of already said this, but where this has really hit home is most people going, yeah, I use this stuff all the time. This is like my now go-to. So now let's talk about some solutions. How are we doing, Sophie? I don't.
Yeah, good. No questions yet, but
All right. Even feel free to say hi in the chat. Or like, because it's very one way. Like, I don't know what you are seeing or thinking or feeling. I can't see your faces, you know. Okay, the solutions. Generative engine optimization. This is like this is a fairly well established process. Hopefully you kind of understand it, but it's effectively the art of kind of analyzing and optimizing your brand in AI interfaces and AI platforms. Typically the process is really simple. Any type of optimization, you get a benchmark. You analyze, you generate a prompt library, and then you put those prompts into these tools, ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity. Thanks, Cam. Thanks, Carla. Appreciate the feedback. And two, we then analyze the responses that are returned from these. Thanks, Carla. I appreciate it. We analyze these responses, and we're going to talk about this in detail because there's a lot of nuance here. And this is what I hope you're kind of picking up from this chat. As I was prepping for this, I was like, this stuff isn't like anyone that's like on LinkedIn doing this kind of like hypey post thing. It's just not that clean cut. When we've seen like big changes, like for clients that we have benchmarked and are measuring how a brand is performing in LLMs and large language models and AI, we see these huge changes. Hey, Jess, thanks for the message. When I see like is like just an example. We saw this like massive shift at like lift in accuracy, lift in like rank, lift in citation, lift in like share of voice, and we were like, yeah, we've crushed it. And all that happened really was actually that ChatGPT upgraded its model, and then the results got better. So we couldn't say yes, this is work that we influence. There's so many variables. It's such a highly moving space that it becomes really interesting. And I was having a chat with Sophie before as we were like chatting about the webinar and the content kind of thing. And I sort of said, there's just so many questions. There's so many various, almost from like a scientific perspective, there's so many variables. It's hard to be very definitive if we're being really honest. And Sophie kind of had this really great line, which was like, the it's can you remember what you said, Sophie? It was basically along the lines of like, you don't what we do know is that you should be doing something. Is that the shift is big enough now that you should start measuring and you should start making changes and you should start making the changes that you know are going to be best for your business regardless of what models do, because this is the future of the way that people engage with your brand. So it's a little bit of like, no, we don't have all the answers, but what we do have is a framework to help you test and start learning and start making smarter decisions for your organization. Sophie, would you add anything to that?
I think, yeah, it's kind of interesting, I guess, as kind of Dave's saying, everything's changing so quickly, but you need to start somewhere. You don't want to be left behind at all. So it's hard to stay up to date, but you definitely want to start somewhere.
Yeah, and the other space that's really, we've tracked over 10,000 prompts now. Like, it's really cool. We've got some like, we work with some of the dreamiest brands around, um, and yeah, and what we're seeing is the answer is always like a bit of both. We're seeing like, hey, you're really strong here, but you're just not even represented across this product line kind of thing. Or we're just seeing like the answer is always just like a bit more nuanced, but it's always like a bit like yes and or both, or type of space of like, this is kind of accurate, but this is not. This is actually, this is really interesting. Well, this is not. So there's this kind of, I don't actually want to go into this too much, but probably it's worth, this is a funny space where I think of like the Dunning-Kruger effect. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's effectively where you go through this, you start something new and you go, hey, this is really hard. And then you learn some stuff and you think, man, I'm awesome. I know everything. And then you go through this like valley of despair and you realize, I know nothing. I'm a baby. This is a complex world. And then you kind of keep learning and keep journeying and you come out with a bit of clarity. There's a couple of like really subtle mindset shifts that I probably need to try and put into almost like an old way, new way type space, which is where we're seeing, and this is really pushing into content strategy as you start to think about the way that a robot is retrieving your information, and the game changing a little bit. It's just less kind of linear from like create some content, the content ranks, people view the content and then they engage, and there's kind of this more linear space versus there's so much more of a black box now, that this kind of idea of going from ranking, sessions, engagement time, conversion rate, where again we're seeing like really high conversion rates from LLM traffic, and we're seeing LLM traffic go up and down across different platforms and things. But this idea of being cited and quoted and recommended, and like so much of the consumer purchasing consideration journey that's happening here is actually, and so understanding actually what's happening in this space is like, that's probably this big shift where if you're a big KPIs, metric sessions and conversion rate, well then your sessions might be in decline, your impressions might be up, and so the customer journey is shifting, and being just aware of this starting the shift and how you're thinking about it is really what I want to point out here. So what? Let's actually talk about how do we do it. The foundation of measurement for GEO is hedged in a prompt library, but there's a few really big problems with generating a prompt library. And that is, one is that ChatGPT and Google, in the US, Google's Search Console has released like an AI performance space, which gives you like a top line, like the grounding query. Well, that's what they call it in Bing, at least, to actually tell us the volume of people that are searching for. And so we're very excited for that data to roll out in New Zealand. But currently, there's no kind of ChatGPT search console. There's no ChatGPT prompt console where we can see the number of people that are prompting for something and how well your brand and your domain is performing in it. That does not exist. It's a black box. The other thing is that AI models are changing a lot. They're often testing different responses. And thirdly, AI models change heavily based on context and memory. I was did this at a big talk on this and got everyone to get out their phones, go to ChatGPT, and I said, okay, I want everyone to prompt like best things to do in Queenstown. Every single person had a slightly different response. So how the heck do you measure that? But the good news is, what we've found is that typically, while everyone had a different response, you could actually group the responses into segments. So if you're a marketer, this makes total sense. So say, for example, we asked, say, best things to do in Queenstown. I go to Nora, and her best thing to do in Queenstown was the scenic heli flight. Now, Nora works in like high-end luxury accommodation. And so for her, context is talking about luxury high-end guests. And what do they love to do? Aviation. It's not in everyone's budget, but that's why her number one recommendation is a scenic heli flight. And then you look at the other kind of segments in the room, and they're getting skyline. They've got families that do the luge, go up skyline, have a look at the view. And then other people are getting a bungee and a jet boat. Younger couples. It's very stereotypical. But what you can start to see is that you're still seeing the same brands influence the same lists, largely through the same cues. Just like SEO, we see that it's looking at TripAdvisor, it's looking at Reddit, it's looking at your reviews, it's looking at these models are just kind of mimicking that again, that strategic space is they want the best answer to the question. And so if they make a bad recommendation, people won't trust their platform. So they're going, how do we know this is the best recommendation? So strategically, I don't know if you've been following GEO, but they often say frequency. Frequently updated information is really important. And my guess is, and this is probably one of those real subtle things, and I really want you to try and like lean into this nuance. Actually, I'm jumping ahead. I'm going to come back to that. It's the same thought that I'd get. But basically, we're all getting a slight variation of response. And so, but we're still seeing the same brands influence the same conversations. Yes, it's slightly personalized. Yes, it's nuanced. Yes, they're presenting tables and graphs and doing the AI interfaces are doing a whole lot of different things. But largely, we're seeing the same similar brands be cited across different variations. And so because of this, but this problem that I want to frame up here is that generating a prompt library that reflects the different segments and the different kind of personas or the way that AI might tailor or change the context of the prompt. If you do a prompt model that's kind of representative of your different segments and personas, you can generate a prompt library that's robust enough that you can lean on to make these decisions. Because like I said, this stuff is actually getting big, and I hope some of these conversations are being elevated within the senior leadership team of your organization to really think about this space. But the foundation of being able to rely on this data is having a prompt model that you can actually lean on. And so at Data Story, when we develop a prompt library, effectively when we first started to do this, we kind of did it really manually, and we'd effectively we hang our hats on the buying journey to give you clarity, because this is probably one of the biggest challenges in marketing is that everyone has a different definition of marketing. If I go to one marketer and say, hey, what's marketing? They'll talk about organic social. One person will just talk about creative, or one person will just talk about like B2B outbound, because that's all they know. But when you break marketing down by the customer journey, you get clarity on where you play, like where your customer is at, and then you get clarity on what success looks like. So say, for example, if someone is in that sort of path to purchase, you go from just like you enter the market, you have these kind of category entry points or these market entry points, you experience a pain thing. So let me give you like the most like obvious example is we had a baby. Catherine and I had a baby. Cool, eh? And within that space, we get pregnant. Catherine sends me a message, as we're pregnant. Oh my gosh, this is crazy. My world's changed. I've entered the market. And then from then on, so a really simple example is like a pram. So all of a sudden, Catherine's like, I need you to sort out a pram. For the first time in my life, I see prams. my brain is now primed to see prams. And then all of a sudden there's things around. I'm like, oh, what? I see someone walking down the street. I'm like, oh, yo, what pram is that? I've entered the pram market. Before that, I was literally blind to it. I could have, there's no way I would have ever, no, but I entered the market. And then I go into this consideration space and I Google best pram, New Zealand, whatever, like best for, like, I'm in Queenstown. I need to do like trail ride. I want like a city pram. Give me these big wheels, give me that Queenstown XXL version, whatever. And so I move into from this target entry point, this consideration space, and what success looks like in those moments is very different. And how we measure and optimize in those moments, I think, gives you strategic clarity. I think you optimize in platform, and you look in platform to optimize, but in terms of what you should play. So we recommend tracking prompts based on where someone is at in this kind of journey. Strategically, we also advise a business to build backwards. There's sort of kind of conversion based prompts, like if someone's literally searching like, is X brand worth it? Like this, their lower funnel, their product aware, their category aware, they're in market, and they're literally going, can I trust you? Are you compatible with me? So all of this kind of like conversion level prompts is a really important place to start tracking. Like, how, if it says us versus competitor, how does AI actually peg you? What is it actually saying about you? And so the other space here that I need to point out is this top one's really is a bit different. This is unique to GEO, and that is brand or entity diagnostics. I'd love to know, almost like show of hands, have you heard of the concept of an entity as far as in this world of optimizing for AI? Because if not, you should probably become aware of it and Google kind of like entity optimization and start to move into the space. This is really the simplest way I can think about it is, if you imagine a model has effectively sent out its bot and it's looked at a whole bunch of information, like from what you say to what a whole the kind of your digital footprint, so to speak, and it's kind of made up its mind around who you are and who you serve or who your products serve. And then the question is, and this is a really beautiful, if you've done anything in product positioning or kind of, content strategy, this is like this kind of wonderful mirror of like, here's actually, when you look at the digital footprint, here's actually how we're perceived. And so these types of prompts around the lines of what would be like examples of like, just like, what is brand good for and why? Who would you compare X brand to and how would you say it's different? And then, so again, no one's actually necessarily going to ask these prompts, but it's just you putting these into Claude, into ChatGPT, into Google AI Overview, into Google AI Mode, into Copilot, into Perplexity, and actually just seeing what is returned by these spaces is a wonderful space of understanding your brand positioning and how has it actually pegged you accurately. So then there's these conversion prompts that we kind of talked about, and then there's this sort of category and consideration level prompts. And this is also where part of, you can kind of do this in this brand diagnostic, entity diagnostic space, which is prompts that are specific to your kind of category. So this is when people are searching specific. So this might be kind of like, if you're a hostel, it'd be best hostel in your location, and kind of going, does our brand get mentioned when someone is looking in our category, best SaaS tool for whatever, or like trying to think like in the kind of the healthcare space, you can start to think about the category. I know that I need travel doctor, so you start looking for travel doctor kind of near me. This is that real, like, I mean, that's probably more conversion intent, but pegging the prompts by the group helps you think about how you measure it. But that brand, so I'm changing my focus, but that entity diagnostics is critical. This is foundational. What we've seen is in people across the GEO kind of industry worldwide is they're starting to realize, if you don't get your entity diagnostics right, all the other optimization doesn't work, because AI doesn't know who you are or where to peg you. And so there's this work to do to kind of prompt the tools, start to do the analysis. And this is a little bit softer. This is a bit more qualitative, where you're looking at the responses and going, kind of like positioning work, and then kind of going, that's not quite right. Okay, what's shaping that? How do we reshape that? Oh, it's actually looking at a press release from a while ago, and we don't talk about ourselves like that anymore. We've introduced this new product. Well, this is updated. And you start to look at the picture there and start to want to think about how to really specifically make sure that from a positioning space, AI has actually pegged you in the right space, in the right market. And then, because that's kind of critical from there, because anything you ask do, everything else you do from there, if you haven't landed that, you're not going to see the results type of thing. And so this is why that if you go to any other kind of GEO talk, they'll talk about entity and being clear. And this includes like schema markup, having an ad ID or an ad organization space, and a really consistent way of talking about what you do. This is kind of that PR brand strategy crossover space as well. So any questions? If you've got questions here on the space, because there's a lot here and I didn't have time to like go into that spaces. We can also pop open LLM refs and look at some of these as well if you want. Just let me know in the chat. I'm aware of time. This is lunch break. Hope you're eating, enjoying whatever you've got for lunch. I had a pie earlier. It was brisket and jalapeno. Holy. Anyway, let's keep going. Correlate AI to outcomes. Measuring AI and being really honest. Like, you look at these like AI metrics and you're like, yeah, we had the share of voice of 12% on things to do related prompts or on our consideration type prompts. And you go, honestly, what does it even mean? Like, what do you talk? Like, let's just be real for a minute. A lot of these AI metrics, I just look at them and I'm just like, so what? Like, what do we do type of space. But where we've found to be huge value is actually understanding kind of where some of these, where you're playing, and this is the beauty of like customer journey based measurement, is when you have a prompt group that's clearly defined by an intent, by where it sits in the journey, and then the where this sits in the journey is, and by being clear where that sits, and then also the other activity that you're doing in this kind of conversion space or you're doing in this kind of consideration space can help you actually understand the role that AI is playing and the switch that's happening. So say, for example, in this slide here, I've got organic sessions. When we report on SEO, we're not just reporting, here's all your impressions. We report on it by product. By like you should be in Search Console. You should have custom filtered to the terms that are relevant to that category. And so the other space, because we also do work with like marketing destinations and things, you can't just talk about a destination. You have to talk about it by ski, by bike, by things to do, by accommodation. And so whenever we're reporting on this, so we've split this out. So then if you can then split out how you're doing an AR and GEO by that space, but then you can also go, how's our organic impressions? Then we filter the sessions on our website by just that category. And then we look at just the performance by that product line. And then all of a sudden you've got this like visibility and you can start to see, okay, our impressions are declining, but we've got this kind of representation in AI, this level of citation. And you can start to actually, you've now got a benchmark with context. When it comes to data, if you don't ever look at a number without context, is that number good? Is that bad? These are rules of kind of good data in that type of space. And so by building out this journey-based measurement, you've also got clarity on what success looks like. Because in this space, we don't just want to necessarily influence AI for like to help it be nicer. We ultimately are working for a business, and that business needs a commercial outcome from doing this work. And so we're playing in a space where the goal is to then drive traffic. So here we should also have your LLM traffic related to this space. Then we should actually have, which by the way, Google's now just, GA4's also just released an AI assisted traffic group. You can also kind of custom build this as well. Again, maybe you should have your bot traffic here so we can actually see the number of bots that have viewed your content within this space. And all of a sudden we've gone from just like a blur of unactionable data to something really insightful, and you've got a benchmark that you can actually correlate. So data story, like the core, the heart of our business is this customer journey based measurement, because this is where you get strategic clarity. We call this data for strategy. This isn't telling you what to do. This is just telling you where you should focus. So when you have these kind of groups of where you're playing, and like I said, you should build backwards. If you don't have a great conversion rate, if you haven't addressed objections to purchase, if you haven't like appealed to their desires, you're not going to see the return of optimizing an AI, because ultimately they're going to go to your website or they're going to go to search, which might be a bloodbath in terms of, but you're not owning that search space. You don't have a strong conversion rate. Then optimizing in that space isn't going to play. And so again, the heart of our business is get this measurement and then folding AI into this space and understanding what these different metrics means is actually just kind of critical to doing digital strategy. No other questions, Sophie? Nothing's come up? No. Hopefully you're still with me. What you can do in priority order. All right, I need a drink. It's my lunch break too, guys. No, that's not true. I'll have a break after this. Because everyone's just like, what can I do? Okay, let me just give you some technical updates. Right now, you need to go to a website. I can put the link in the chat. And where's my thing? Oh, closed it. I will put in chat a link to basically pop your URL in and see if your website is indexed and can be indexed by bots. This is the starting line. In some businesses, I've come across I've come across one very large brand. This site literally couldn't be indexed by AI. Huge cost to the business. This is the starting line. And so actually, let me just like find it right now. If you guys can't see my screen there. I'm going to put this in the chat because you should all literally do this like while you're on the call. My internet is going slow. Okay, let's use this. There's a lot of different tools, and there's some really neat kind of like tools that will help you just like do a generic kind of AI like audit, which is like fine. Did you guys get that URL all right? Yeah, have some fun with that. Pop your URL in there, see if you can actually be indexed, follow the actions, update your robots.txt file. Should be tickety boom. This is table stakes. Then there's the technical kind of updates. This is like making sure that your website is indexed. To me, doing this work well is really important. We do a lot of like schema work, a lot of technical SEO, GEO work, but to me, it's not the game changer. It's just a simple part of doing digital well. And then there's kind of your content strategy and content updates. And I do want to talk about this, but we're running out of time. And then there's your offsite content updates. This is what other brands and other places are saying about you. It's really underrated. Everyone wants to skip over it because it's hard. And you can't just yeah, but that space is really important. We're having some really cool conversations with clients around Reddit strategy, around optimizing for reviews has always been a massive space of good digital. We've got a question. Yes, Cam. Any initial thoughts on the relationship between AI search and organic social? Traditional search, Google, and more top of funnel content like Instagram Reels have not had a lot to do with each other, but wondering if you predict a closer relationship between top and bottom. Cam, I love this question. So and let's actually do this. Let's jump into kind of talking about content strategy quickly because the answer is like, because there's also just the rise of what you might an organic social of like social search. So people searching on Instagram, people searching on TikTok, people searching on like YouTube type of space being like absolutely critical. There's also this like macro narrative of like people getting so over slop. This is a little bit anecdotal. That people are like the rise of video and social. YouTube was introducing a tag to basically say if something was AI generated or not, because people were just getting so over like the crave for authenticity. And so this like organic social space and these other formats of content, because if you imagine like written generic information about a brand has effectively become valueless. And I even want to show you something. Let me do this like right now. Stick with me, team. I'm going to share. I want you to have can you see this? Is this legible, Sophie? I can't see you, so you'd have to.
Yeah, we can read that.
Yeah, so this is what we're looking at here. This is Google's like official documentation, optimizing your website for generative AI features on Google search. And I want you to just look at this paragraph that I've highlighted. Commodity content, for example, something like 7 tips for first home buyers, like that's or there's so much irony in that title already. In terms of like that they're calling this commodity content, is often based on common knowledge, which could originate from anyone and typically adds little unique insight for readers. In contrast, non-commodity content, such as why we waive the inspection and save money or look inside the sewer line, but like I don't know what that's actually saying, provides unique, expert, or experienced takes that go beyond common knowledge and the ordinary. The way I read this is Google already knows all the basic stuff. And so the future of content is your brand's unique view on the world, or its unique way of doing things, or it's like, or yeah, basically, like, this is why a lot of marketers are going, brand is the future, because there used to be this, like, when like HubSpot came out and they coined this kind of like content marketing space, they really shaped this idea of like build trust through showing your knowledge on the industry, versus now it's like that generic knowledge on an industry is now a commodity. That means the value of it has like fallen through the floor. And so that space, like, the to answer like your question, Cam, I think a brand's like unique position or unique angle or unique take on something is actually the future of content, because all the traditional information, like Google itself is saying, we don't want it. We don't need it. Like, we're literally like Google. It's the same thing with like a ChatGPT. Like ChatGPT is like so smart when it's like ranked as like a person or whatever. Yet it fails so comically at so many things. But anyway, but so there's that space, Cam. But what I'd also note is there's this kind of like, as you'll know, like good social strategy and good social content still plays in different spaces, and that still changes how you measure your social strategy. And so, say for example, if I think about, so just caveat, Data Story does not do organic social strategy. You should ask Cam; he's absolutely a legend in this, a legend in this sphere. Like, your organic content is like, you can have content for virality, for top of funnel, for like for discovery, and then you can have like content that's more like informative, long form content that's addressing an objection or addressing a barrier. And so you might get less reach on that,